I'm answering the question, is the Insta360 X4 worth the upgrade from the Insta360 X3? Let's find out. I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of the footage from the Insta360 X3 versus the X4. I'm going to run through some of the impressive specs on the new X4, and I'm going to take you through some of the editing features in the new Insta360 app, making your ability to edit 360 footage easier than ever. Plus, we have a bonus update on a pro tip that I've shared with you before, for those of you who want to take things a little bit further. Now, we know that the selfie stick is invisible, but I've got a new and improved way of making the suction mount disappear as well. Now, I've been using Insta360 cameras for quite a while now, and luckily for me, Insta360 saw what we were doing and really liked it, so they wanted to give us their support. So I want to say a huge thank you to Insta360 for supporting all of the videos we've made over the last few years, and in particular for sponsoring this video. Now, while this video is sponsored, I believe it's important that I only ever endorse products that I genuinely believe in. So you're going to get an honest review from me today and my honest opinion on whether or not the X4 is worth the upgrade from the X3. And hopefully I'll show you enough that you can decide for yourself if it's right for you too. Now, let's get into the new features of the Insta360 app that make editing 360 footage even easier than ever. There's now 3 modes for editing your shot: Quick Mode, Pro, and AI. Quick Mode adds a reframing joystick control to set up the perfect shot, or you can still drag the image to set the angle you want. Here you can easily switch ratios depending on whether you want a landscape or portrait shot. Quickly review the 360 surroundings, easily select your subject to track it to keep it in the shot, or just hit record and move your phone to follow your subject, framing the shot just like you've gone back in time and you're flying behind your car, filming it live with a camera phone. Pro Mode gives you even more power, from Tiny Planet, keyframing individual movements using a host of presets, changing perspectives, de-warping the image, using the viewfinder or the tracker to track your subject. AI Mode analyzes your clip and tries to find the best shots. Now, I found this better suited to shots with people or scenery rather than the chase or unicorn shots, but let me know how you find it. There's also the full-blown editor that's great for editing social media clips. It's a surprisingly powerful editor with cuts, effects, text, and the ability to add music. It even has a proxy mode where it uses a lower resolution video file for faster, smoother preview while editing, but it still gives you the full quality video in the export. And its motion ND mode was especially impressive, helping to balance out shots taken in bright environments. Then there's Shot Lab with a host of ideas, each with a mini tutorial of what shots you need for each effect. The rest is really just up to your imagination. And if you want to take things further, you can use the free Insta360 Studio desktop software. There, you can reframe your shots and export your footage for use in your favorite editing software, which for me happens to be DaVinci Resolve. Now I think it's time we got into the specs of the new X4 versus the X3 and answer the question, is the X4 worth the upgrade?
The new X4 now shoots up to 8K versus the X3's 5.7. Now that doesn't sound like a huge jump, but you've got to remember that's just the increase in horizontal pixels. Multiply that by the number of additional vertical pixels and you appreciate that these numbers don't do the jump justice, especially when you realize that this gives you around 13 million more pixels in your 360 shot. For perspective, that actually represents over 70% more pixels and you can really notice it. Now that 8K resolution is for the full 360-degree shot. Once you crop, you have far fewer pixels, but because there's such a higher resolution now, that crop looks immensely cleaner, practically a full 4K shot. Another significant upgrade is for slow motion. Previously, the X3 could only shoot 100 frames per second at 3K. And remember, after you reframe, you're cropping that down to a much lower resolution. The X4 can shoot 100 frames per second at 4K. Now, with such a bump in resolution, particularly when filming in 8K, you're going to need more storage. Now, Insta360 sent me their 512GB SD card, so there was no way I was going to run out of space, and it performed flawlessly. The other consideration is battery life, and the X4 steps up the game again with a 60 to 70% increase in battery life at 5.7K. Also giving you a 135-minute runtime. Now, of course, 8K is much more demanding on the battery, and the runtime is a little shorter at 75 minutes. However, that is still a considerable amount of time and certainly comparable to the battery life on the X3, if not even longer despite being able to shoot at 8K. Another cool feature is the gesture control, allowing you to set up your shot and start recording with a simple hand gesture. I actually found that quite useful once or twice during the day. There's more improvements and upgrades across all the different shooting modes that I just couldn't fit into this video, but the one that I really wanted to call out is the isolated exposure. This allows for different exposure settings on either lens. This is for when you have the camera inside the car with one lens facing outwards and the other facing inwards to the darker interior of the car. Previously, the contrast between these two was often quite stark on the X3 when using this particular mode, but now it is much more natural with the ability to tune it based on how different the lighting is outside the car versus inside the car. Honestly, this is a huge step forward. This actually makes it possible to use the camera inside the car much more often than I could before, helping with creating multiple camera angles from one device or for cool panning shots like this. But of course, the thing I was most interested in seeing is how much does it improve the quality of those unicorn and chase shots, and I can tell you the X4 did not disappoint. Now of course you know that the selfie stick is automatically invisible, but something you'll see in most people's shots is the suction mount that sits at the base of it. Unless you've been watching my videos, in which case you'll have noticed that often there is no suction mount.
Now, if you've seen the approach I've used before, my technique now has actually changed. So I'm going to quickly run you through the basics of how I now do it.
Once you see the principles I apply here, you'll be able to look up how to do this in your preferred editing software, but for me, my preference is DaVinci Resolve Studio. And in its Fusion pane, I hit Shift Space, type in paint and hit Enter to add that to the current clip. I choose the Stroke tool, change that to clone mode, hit Option or Alt click to select the area to clone pixels from, and use that to paint over the subject. I then use the Select tool to select the paint strokes, then create a paint group. Right click on the center of that, go down to Paint Group 1 Center and choose Modify with Tracker Position. Then, over in Modifiers, tell the tracker source that it needs to be connected to the output from Media in 1. Now, we need to track the movement to keep the painted sections in the same place on the car. You may need to play around with the settings to get this just right, but when you do, hit track backwards and forwards and now you have your clip. Sometimes you might notice a little bit of overspill of the paint onto an area that you don't want. To fix this, we're going to duplicate the clip as an overlay and mask it. I have a keyboard shortcut to mark this clip as orange. That's so that when you're in the color tab, you can see that it's been marked with an orange dot, and that means that you know which of the clips to modify. That clip still has the paint on it, of course, so we'll remove that first. Back in the color tab, I'm going to mark out the area of the original shot I want to keep using a window. Add a little bit of softness to it, not too much. And because this is such a small area and it's all entirely dark, the tracker might have a little bit of difficulty with it, so increasing the tracked area, including more contrasted elements, will make the tracker's life a little bit easier. Then you just hit track forwards and backwards. Now that it's tracked, let's adjust the window and add alpha output, connecting that up accordingly, and that will ensure that only the part of the image we want showing through shows through. So when you go back to the editing tab, you'll see that you've got a nice, crisp, marked out area with no overspill. Then adjust your shots on the timeline and you have this. Now roll in and roll out, skate on the beat like a roll bounce. No, I got a rubber for the whole town, got a foot up on the gas, never slow down.
So for me, the quality of the footage on the X4 versus the X3 alone is worth the upgrade, let alone its other capabilities. And one of the improvements I'm going to find particularly useful is the split exposure. It now has a much better balance between the bright exterior of the car and the dark interior. And if you do decide to upgrade, make sure you use the link in the description where you'll get a free gift with every purchase, subject to availability of course. Thanks again to Insta360. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of the videos that I make with the X4 in future, and check out my other channel with my friend JM and Friends, where you'll be seeing some of the content created with the X4 soon.